Managing digital experience applications is quite the balancing act. Between providing the freedom and flexibility to create amazing experiences for your users and still maintaining control of your growing fleet of sites and applications. Achieve that perfect balance with Platform SH. Platform SH is a cloud-based end-to-end platform that enables you to efficiently build, host, scale, and secure sites and applications without worrying about infrastructure, whether it's 10 sites or 10,000. Because when infrastructure and workflows are taken care of, teams are free to focus more on what really matters. Everything you need to power your sites is available from the start, and then maintained, hosted, and secured by Platform SH. Databases and other services can be easily implemented into your sites with just a line of code, letting you launch faster. Instant cloning creates perfect production replicas in moments. Developers can work and test in parallel across an unlimited number of environments and then merge with production flawlessly and fearlessly. Plus, code can be written in whatever programming language works for your teams, making code more flexible and future-proof. And without traditional bottlenecks to deal with, every update can be deployed with complete confidence, anytime, anywhere, across your entire fleet. Yes, even on Fridays. Freedom and control balanced together in one platform. Learn more and try for free at platform.sh.
Okay, hello everybody. Today is a Friday, so it's day to one more episode of Deploy Friday, because every day is a good day to deploy your application in the cloud with Platform SH. Today, let's talk about Payara, the Java server. I'm here with Shad. Hello, Shad. How are you? You're on the mute.
Hey, not on mute. Doing pretty well. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm fine too. And my guest. Hello, Fabio. How are you?
Oh, Fabio, glad to be here. Thank you.
Oh, and my good friend, the second Deploy Friday with you, Rudy. Hello, how are you?
Hi, Otávio. Yeah, fine, thank you.
I'm glad you enjoyed twice. So today, let's talk about Payara. But first, let's start with a couple questions about because as you know, Payara has support to Jakarta EE and microprofile, right? So my first question is, what is Jakarta EE?
Yeah, maybe I can start answering that. Yeah, as you probably a lot of people know, Jakarta EE is the successor of the Java EE when it moved from Oracle to the Eclipse Foundation. There are some changes now done. There is some in the latest release, Jakarta EE9, some older technologies are removed. The namespace is changed for legal reasons. So with Jakarta EE, you have just one dependency, all the requirements, all the needs that you have for your enterprise applications are there, accessing database queues. You have front-end systems, you have Java server faces, you have also within the Eclipse Foundation, you have the MVC stack. So you have everything from start to end available within that Jakarta EE. No integration issues, all in one place, ready to be used.
Oops. Okay. And what is microprofile?
Okay, I think I can take that one. So as Rudy mentioned, Jakarta is the successor to Java EE, but there was a period of time where the Java EE platform was stagnating. Most of the vendors, aside from Oracle, were discussing with the community what was the way to go, because many requirements by the community, amongst them centralized configuration or more compatibility with cloud architectures, were not there. So multiple vendors, one of them Payara, IBM, Red Hat, and Tommy Drive, at some point banded together and they said, hey, let's do something while Java EE moves along. So microprofile was born, and originally it was just a subset of specifications from Java EE. It was CDI, JAX-RS, and JSON-P, if I remember correctly. And the idea was to set a strong base to create a platform that allowed the development of microservice-ready applications and much later in the future, cloud-ready or cloud-native applications. So at that point in time, MicroProfile was getting traction. Then Jakarta came along, and MicroProfile was deciding, okay, so let's focus on cloud-native. And this specification was donated to the Eclipse Foundation. And recently, a working group was formed. So any one of the vendors that originally contributed to the specs now can formally contribute code, make part of the process, making sure that the requirements of the community are taken into account. And hopefully it will be a long endeavor.
You mentioned something about spec, but what does mean this spec? How does it work?
Yeah, that's quite some process, of course. Yeah, a specification does only describe how something should work. For instance, how the configuration, how the properties, how the configuration value should be read. It is not an implementation itself. It just says how it should be done by each implementation. Like Payara is one of the implementers of MicroProfile. Besides that document, because it is mainly a document describing how it should work, you have then the TCK, the test compatibility kit, to actually enforce what was decided, what was written, that each implementation can be checked. Does it indeed follow that specification, yes or no? So specification is a standard, so that you have one way of working, and it can be implemented by many vendors, and you have the guarantee that you do not have any lock-in with the vendor or any framework, because as long as a implementation follows that specification, you can switch from one to another.
Nice. And I guess you already replied, but me as a simple Java developer, why should I care about standards? I mean, is that important to me? And how that is related with cloud?
Well, that's actually a good question, and it's the main question on why people should consider developing applications using Jakarta or MicroProfile. And standards are important for multiple reasons, but I think that the main one is variety. That means that you're not tied to a specific vendor. Where there's a body of standards, there's room for anyone, a big or small company, to develop an implementation of that standard. And you, as a developer, have the right and the option to choose what it suits you best. So if you come, for example, developing applications and look at Payara, at the Payara platform, then you know that aside from those standards, you also are getting a set of perks and benefits that probably will make your life easier as a developer, and also the long term, because applications are not developed in a vacuum. That means that you have to consider long-term support for whatever you are implementing. So then you have to look into what your vendor is offering you. Whether if you don't have a standard, and the vendor of that implementation of that framework, software, whatever you want to call it, decides not to continue developing that, then you're screwed, literally, because there's nothing else you can look at. So standards open the possibility of more market variety that allows you to choose when a vendor is no longer supporting whatever application framework you're using. Then you can look into other vendors' options and set up migration or implementing new projects using that option. And that is really a good benefit for cloud native, because cloud native is composed of multiple vendors in the market, and the idea that all of them are following a set of standards guarantee you that once you are not allowed to continue with a vendor because of budget constraints or because of preferences or because you have to make your software compatible with another suite of tools, then you can quickly migrate to another vendor. And you have a certain guarantee that migration is easier because both vendors are following the same standard. So the process should be as pain-free as possible.
Nice, nice. You mentioned the word cloud native, and that's become so buzzword. I mean, everybody talks about cloud native, but what does mean cloud native?
it means a lot and it means nothing in the sense that cloud native is more of a process that you're following. Of course, one of the things is that you are deploying your application on a server which is not in your own data center, that it is with a cloud provider or in a private cloud. But if you just say you're doing cloud native when you're actually just renting a server somewhere and just doing the same thing as you would do when it was on your own local machine, well, I don't call that cloud native. Cloud native is also integrating with all the possibilities that, for instance, your cloud provider gives you with the platform, from logging, alerting, all kinds of services that he can provide, security, authentication. There is a wide range of features that can be provided externally and that you can then integrate within your application as it is deployed and somewhere. And that's one aspect. But another aspect is, of course, because cloud native is most of the time done with microservices. It does not even need to be, but most of the time it is. And as you all know, if you only have to deploy one application, it's easy. When you have to maintain 10, 100, or 1,000 applications, you need to do some kind of automation. And cloud native is also that kind of thing. Automation, CI/CD pipelines, which go directly to the live instance. If, for instance, all the tests and all the succeeds and those things. So what is cloud native? To come at your question, it is that you are using the capabilities of the provider where you're running your application, you integrate it with them, and you have some kind of automation. But again, it is a wide range, and there is a lot of people just say, oh, cloud native, because it is a buzzword, as you say.
So it means everything, and also it means nothing. So it's more a philosophical discussion.
Yes.
Good to know. And one point about cloud native, there are a couple solutions. So you can go to the landscape. And yes, that include us, Platform SH. So you can take a look. As I already mentioned about CI/CD, as Platform SH, we have a couple support. The whole goal is make you to take your application move easily to the cloud. Or if you are using cloud with YAS, the whole point is, okay, don't need to handle the whole operation stuff. So use Platform SH to decrease this kind of complexity. But anyway, let's go. And finally, we meet Payara. So what is Payara?
Well, that's a really broad question, but let me summarize with we are a company based in the UK, and we maintain a commercial support for Payara Platform Enterprise, which is our business suite for developing applications ready for mission-critical production systems using Jakarta and Microprofile. And we also maintain, because we are an open source company, an open source variant named Payara Platform Community. So our story is long, so I'll just summarize that we started at some point being a fork of, or the product started at some point being a fork of Oracle Glassfish Open Source Edition. A while back, after Oracle decided, unfortunately, not to continue commercial support for Glassfish, which was the reference implementation of the Java EE set of specifications. So nowadays, Payara and Glassfish are vastly different products. Sadly, Glassfish has lots of kinds of support, either both open source or commercial. So for companies that are running applications on Glassfish, we do recommend that they consider using Payara because it's the most similar product. But we also offer support for any kinds of scenarios, companies running on-premises installations of their infrastructures, and if they are running an application server runtime, then they can consider using Payara. Or if not, and in the case that, for example, they consider running applications on the cloud, Payara also it's ready to be installed and implemented and configured on multiple cloud environments, platforms included. So yeah, I think that's the gist of it. So
yeah, and the range of products is much more now than just the application server. We have IDE plugins to work in the optimal way in your development environment. We have integration with tracing tools. We have integration with APM tools, application management tools. We are working on a product which is called Payara Cloud, so that again you can bring your application quite easily, just a few clicks on the cloud. It runs in the cloud, all managed with Kubernetes, but hiding all that complexity of Kubernetes. But let's be fair, that can be very complex. So it started from the initial Glassfish fork, but we have now a wide range of things that we are offering to people.
I love any kind of thing that abstract the Kubernetes thing. So and that's a nice idea. That's why I like the whole concept of platform message. And by the way, Rudy and I wrote an ebook about how to make this thing together. So if you want to know more how to use platform message with Payara, so go to this book here. Is download for free, so you don't need to pay for that. That's amazing, right? And enjoy your weekend maybe to know how to deploy Payara application in platform message.
I'm curious, just because I'm a little less familiar, obviously, not being a Java developer myself. I mean, you have Payara splitting off from Glassfish, and other than some of these other services you're providing, is there anything fundamentally really at its core different between the two? Fabio, you spoke about somebody being able to consider moving to Payara, even with a familiarity with Glassfish. Is there big differences?
Well, yeah, there's the commercial pitch elevator talk that Payara Enterprise is a commercially supported product. So if you have the money and you have a mission critical production system that requires constant attention and support, then Glassfish is a product that doesn't receive that because there's no commercially back entity that it's willing to just simply fix things or squash bugs as they come along. And unfortunately, Glassfish was left in a state that code quality was really, really bad. So the main differentiator first is the Payara server, and all the products of the Payara platform are constantly receiving attention on the code quality department, making sure that security vulnerabilities are considered and patched. We are following also closely implementations of both Jakarta and microprofile. Glassfish, unfortunately, is not compatible with microprofile because it's only the bare minimal implementation of Jakarta E. Well, yeah, of Java E. I think that the latest implementation of Glassfish is already compatible with Jakarta E, but that's it. As Rudy mentioned, we also have a lot of ecosystem tooling that supports the notion of running Payara in any development environment that you consider with any IDE or tools that you need, and you can deploy them multiple ways. And Glassfish, unfortunately, doesn't have that tooling. It had it in the past, but once it lost traction, the entire project, then everything else died down. So Payara come up and pick up the pace in that regard. And aside from that, Payara has also let's say a set of features that Glassfish doesn't have. Main one of them is that internally Payara functions using Hazelcast, which is a distributed data grid technology that can be used to reliably and easily construct a cluster of nodes or multiple instances across a network, which is really important and is one of the core of Payara's functionalities on the cloud environment. If you don't have that, unfortunately, the product wouldn't be competitive in the market. And Glassfish, unfortunately, is still running on a really old project called Project Shoal, which by all purposes is dead at the moment, and it hasn't really been updated to conform to today's standards of how to properly run an application on a cloud environment.
Okay.
Nice. And we have a question for the audience. Oh, let's check. Ianad Prague. It is possible to develop serverless application with Payara?
Then again, the same question, what exactly is serverless? The same question with cloud native, what is serverless? If you mean serverless as you start up a instance for each request that the user does, yes, of course, you can do that. And the most easy option is then that you use Payara Micro. That can be used as a instance for answering the user request. But most of the time, those serverless solutions are not optimal, because you not only need to answer the request of the user, but you also have to connect to the databases, to external resources. And when you every time need to start up and initiate the connection, for instance, to the database, then that is not an optimal solution. So that's why also serverless has now also the state where it can kept alive and that it can handle multiple requests. But what is then the difference with a normal installation of the environment? So yes, we support that serverless model, but again, I don't think it is useful in certain cases, for sure, but it's not the solution for all the issues that you have. You need to consider other things, other solutions why you are switching to serverless. What are the reasons that you think that serverless will help you? And maybe Payara or even other vendors can give you a solution for those reasons that you think that you need serverless, but stay with your classic installation, and your problems can also be solved.
Good one. Okay, the serverless discussion is usually always huge, because as cloud native, nobody knows what does that mean. But yes, I totally agree. I mean, it depends. The act that answer, right? So it depends several things. But Payara is our Jakarta E that provides microprofile as well. My question is, could you tell us why they go to this path? What the advantage to go to this path? It doesn't make a little bit heavy going to this way?
In what regard? Because going this way, regarding what other options in the Java development landscape, like other frameworks, is that what you mean?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so why would you choose Payara? Well, let me say multiple scenarios. Let's say you're a legacy developer. You have 10, 20 years of experience developing applications in Java, and you know that for us, all these, we already know how difficult it was for developers to quickly develop and deploy applications in the, let's say, in the old landscape. It requires planning, it requires a lot of, let's say, kerfuffle between architects, between developers, between operations staff, and all that, which in the modern landscape, all of that is squashed into the DevOps figure. You have an engineer that is capable of developing, bringing that to an environment, deploying, making sure that it's running correctly, making sure that it's iterating correctly, and if there are any issues, he or she can properly spot it. So if you're that type of person, Payara is the platform for you, because legacy is still considered there. If you're developing from old applications and you need to develop them, to maintain them, because you don't want to invest a lot of money, or your organization can invest a lot of money in updating of that application, then Payara got you covered, because we have support for all the technologies as well. If you're a modern developer, then the question changes. Why would you consider Jakarta and microprofile? Well, I already said it, those are standards. So if you start developing in those and 5 years down the road, then Payara, for example, decides, now, you know what, we are doing something else, because life is like that. Then you can switch to another vendor. Or if you start with another vendor and the same scenario occurs, then you can switch back. Well, you can switch to Payara. And that gives you a continuity across the road. You don't need to worry that much about the future, because that is the thing. When you start developing in one framework, you just don't simply develop the application, call it a day, and then move to something else. Even if you do that, there is a lot of people that will continue your work down the road, that will continue developing and iterating these applications, and they have to consider that. So Jakarta and microprofile consider that. And the advantage of running Payara is that we also have all the considerations in mind. For example, if you are integrating this into let's say a cloud environment, and you, for example, heard about Docker or Kubernetes and want to try out how these things work, then Payara got you covered as well, because our infrastructure, Payara is designed with that infrastructure in mind. You can run Payara easily into Kubernetes with minimal configuration, and that is easily what developers want to, because inherently we are lazy creatures, so we want to do really the absolute minimal when we are starting and trying new things. And if I have to take myself 1-2 hours to properly understand something when it should just work, then that's the advantage of it. So I think that's one of the main important causes for that.
So you're saying that, can I combine Jakarta E and microprofile just one product?
Yeah, it's encouraged, because both frameworks and platforms are complementing each other at the moment. There is a lot of internal, let's say, discussion amongst vendors whether in the future both of them will continue the separate paths, whether they'll merge or will complement within each other. But that is the thing. There's no penalty in using both of them. Most application server runtimes at the moment are considering support for both of them. Or if, for example, you just simply want to use one or the another, you can also do that as well. There's absolutely no downsides of that. At the end, it really comes up to what you want to do and how do you want to code it. And the importance is that you have the options, because if you don't have them, then you have to write everything yourself. An API for configuration, an API for probably developing and implementing metrics in your systems. And all of this is something that one of the platforms that I mentioned brings you to the table. So that's good.
Yeah, and I will even say that because my microprofile is marketed as the specifications for the microservice architecture, but they are generally usable. Like Fabio said, you have the configuration, you have the metrics. Those are not specific for cloud environments. Those are also very useful in your monolithic application running locally within your data center. So even if you're not into cloud, Payara and with using then the microprofile options is also a good combination.
Okay. So I can combine. And there is just these two products, so microprofile and Jakarta E. Jakarta E, and usually the people related microprofile to microservice. But can I use Jakarta E in microservice?
Yeah, originally that was the intention, and a platform for developing microservice-ready applications, because microservice is not just only a buzzword; it's a complete philosophy of how to develop, maintain, and support applications on an organization. It is a culture change mostly. So, yeah, originally it was that, but then the trend was moving of the development landscape globally was moving towards cloud native. So these vendors that originally started microprofile choose to move then in microprofile to that vein, in that, hey, you need a framework for developing cloud native applications or applications that can easily be deployed into any cloud environment. Here's what you need to do. And they are following the trends and other architecture patterns by big players in the industry like Netflix or Spotify or big companies that are now and have dealt with these challenges of implementing cloud native applications in the world. And that's it.
Okay. But usually when you talk about Jakarta E, there's no way. We need to talk about Spring. So sorry guys, but What's the difference between Payara and Spring? When should I use Payara and when should I not use Payara to use Spring instead?
Well, allow me to take that because it complements my previous question. Yeah, Spring, it's the elephant in the room whenever we bring up Jakarta, and I will try to keep this as minimal with controversy as I can. Spring is a powerful platform. No one can deny that. It has an API and it has facilities and tools for anything related to cloud native applications, and no one can deny that. But the thing is that the Spring maintained by Pivotal is not standard. It's a proprietary framework maintained by this company, and whenever they want to go, you have to move along. You, as member of the community, you can say if in the future an API changes, yes, you can contribute, you can request and argue, and you can also buy commercial support for Spring and you get a say in it. But that's about it. There's not much involvement as you as a person and as an individual in the framework along the way, because you go along the whims of Pivotal as a company. Jakarta, on the other hand, which is maintained at the moment by the Eclipse Foundation, which is a neutral organization composed of all of these vendors, allows you as a developer to say where you want to go. And that's important because, as I mentioned, standards allow you to consider the long-term perspective of how you maintain and support these applications that you develop. So if you want to say, hey, I do not consider that the directions you're taking into this API are the best, what can you do? Then you as a member of the community can say, and you have a voice and you have a vote in saying, no, this is where I don't want to go because take my requirements in mind. Then something will happen along those ways. Or if you have commercial support with any of the vendors that are part of the Jakarta working group inside the Eclipse Foundation, you can talk to those vendors. Or, for example, if you are a Payara customer, you can let us know that you are not happy with the direction something or an API is taking, for example, and then we'll intervene for you and say, in behalf of our customers, I think that this is what we should do. Let us know if we can openly negotiate how to properly implement this. And I consider that is the way that software should be implemented, because in the end, Java developers, I think that the biggest draw is the hugely open community that we have, no matter what platform we are using. Jakarta and standards are the main draw of that. So that's certainly something that you don't get in Spring. Yes, you get all the power and all the cool stuff on Spring. No one can deny that because most of us developers are drawn to that, but you have to consider the long-term implications of marrying into a framework. So if long-term support is what you need, you really think that you are good with Spring? So that is a good question that you should ask yourself.
That seems big. Do any particularly important or impressive or interesting community-driven initiatives come to mind? Since you have this, this is a thing that splits them apart, this kind of feedback.
As in organizations that I have talked about and they have switched that mindset, for example?
Oh, I just mean that Spring maybe gives you less of a voice that these communities might allow you to have. Being a part of that community, you have a voice in some way that the API may not be fulfilling what you need or something like that. Mm-hmm. Does anything come to mind specifically of a direction that has been taken or is become a priority?
Yeah, microprofile is what come to mind, because microprofile was not an effort that we vendors decided to implement on a whim. It's not like, hey, let's do cloud native now. It's because our user base, the community in general, was complaining loudly about Java EE was not moving anywhere. It was stagnating. We are seeing now patterns of developing cloud native applications. We're seeing Kubernetes, Docker. We need API for configuration. That was actually a fun anecdote, because there was there was a configuration API being considered and in development for the next iteration of Java EE, but then it was taking years of moving that along, and then microprofile decided, no, let's do it ourselves because our community needs that. So once we implemented that, then Oracle took notice and say, well, you already have that on microprofile, then we don't see the need to implement that in Java EE. And months later, they say, you know what? Actually, let's give this back to the community. It seems that they know what they're doing because they can move bundles along. And at the end, that's the power of a community. Can you say that on the same on Spring and Pivotal end? I don't think so. I don't think that the community has that power over that, but I could be wrong.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, and every time that we talk about standards, you talk about Spring, we talk about the new buzzword in the Java world, that is Quarkus, right? And it's hard to avoid this comparisonship because Quarkus becomes so popular in so few time. And my question is, why should I use Payara instead of Quarkus?
Well, again, also Quarkus is a very nice product. It solves. It tries to solve one of the issues that that we have with Java in some cases, and that is that the startup of the JVM can take some time. So they are going the route of pre-compiling it, so compiling it to the binary code of your operating system, and then it starts up faster. That's a very nice thing. It's also a clever technology, etc. So it's in that sense a wonderful thing that they are trying out. But it comes with, in my mind, in my eyes, a huge sacrifice that you have to take, because of that the fact that you need to be able to compile it to generate a native binary code. They have to change they cannot use some of the features that we are used to do in Java. You cannot use it when you are using Quarkus, for the simple fact, for instance, that compilation, it's called a closed world. At compile time, everything needs to be known and fixed. So things like reflection, yes, they are possible, but you need to explicitly say when and where you do the reflection and what the outcome can be. So you have a long list. There are tools to help you with that, but there is a long list for that. A lot of frameworks are depending on those kind of reflection. Let's say, for instance, JPA is for the database access is using a lot of those reflection things. CDI, the dependency injection, the same. So that means that if you are used to work in even with Spring or with Jakarta EE, a lot of principles you cannot use anymore with Quarkus. And for what benefit? For the fast startup. But Java itself, the OpenJDK, has what's called class data sharing, which you can have an improvement of the startup time with 35% and more. So if you're really interested in taking the startup time down, then that's also an option. And even an application, even you can go to the stream, and an application created with Java EE 1.2 20 years ago, you can use that CDS option there, and you can improve the startup. So Quarkus, as I said, very nice. It solves that one thing, but if you ask me, the cost for the developers, because you have to rewrite your application, and so the cost for the company and the developers is too high.
Whoa, that's a good point. And yeah, I guess there's the same logic behind the micronodes, right? So if you try to compare Payara and micronodes, it'll be almost the same. And right now we are looking more to the Java framework architectures, right? So look to who are using reflection, who are using IoT or native. I have a couple of questions about that. First, could you explain to us what is reflection Java, what is reflection in general, and what is IoT, and when should I take each one?
Fabio, or should I stay?
Well, I talked a lot, so I'm not sure if you want to
Okay.
keep talking.
I'll continue then. So
Please don't
reflection.
fight. Don't fight.
No. It's
I'm the guy who is speaking more here. Don't worry.
Yeah, but I have that tendency of over speaking, so that's why.
Yeah, we are Latinas. We do this thing like that.
So basically, Java is a type-safe language, meaning that at compile time everything is known. So every variable is known. If that variable is a string or a number, and all those kind of things. So it's really helpful because it reduces the mistakes that a developer makes greatly. So it is a good thing that we have that type safety. But sometimes that type safety can works against us if we are handling unknown things, like I mentioned already, that the JPA framework for accessing databases. It needs to be able to handle a class which maps the contents within Java to the database. But that framework cannot be written for your classes, because how can the implementer of that framework knows which classes you're going to use? So the idea of reflection is that it scans the entire class code and finds all the variables, all the properties, what are the types, and how they are linked to, for instance, the database. But that means that you need to scan those things, and that it is unknown what you can end up with in the results. And that's what the AOT at the ahead of time compilation does, because Java normally that's byte-coded, so it is independent of the operating system where you're running on. At runtime, your JVM just interprets, checks your code, what's there, that bytecode, the Java bytecode, and executes that. And it does some optimizations for highly used parts of your code. It optimizes it then to compile it to the native code after he sees that he can do it, and it is beneficial, etc. Ahead of time, as it is, the word says it already, it is ahead of the time that it is used. So it is during the compiling of your program, it compiles everything to that native binary code. The problem there is that it needs to know everything at that time. The JVM can make all those decisions later on when it is using it in runtime. It can find out what is scanned, what is used a lot, for instance, maybe an if-then-else statement. In 99% of the cases, you're always using the if branch, so it can optimize your code for that case. The ahead of time compilation cannot do that, because he has no idea how your code will be used in production at runtime. So he just generates generic code, which works fine, but is not the optimal one. And since also that reflection is not possible, because he needs to know upfront what can be the outcome. The JVM can do all kinds of dynamic things, but the ahead of time compilation cannot do that, because it needs to be very static. So there are ways around, and they are trying, and I agree that those things will improve for the coming years. But that's also the reason why natively compiled code is slower at runtime than the JVM, because that's so optimized, so clever that that compiler in the JVM that it outperforms your native code.
Good point. I guess there's always a good discussion. When should I use one? When should I not use one? Do you have any kind of study case where it's compare a native coding, GraalVM code running outside the Java and in another code running inside Java to compare about performance, something like that?
Well,
Go ahead, Fabio.
Okay, yeah. So I think that we're going to say the same thing, but our CEO Steve Millich has written interesting blog article where there's a lot of compilation and benchmark of AOT compiling before versus just-in-time compiling, and the metrics and numbers I'd like to share. I at the moment do not have the link. Not sure if you have it in hand, really, so we can share
No.
it. Yeah, well, we can do that after the talk, and post it on the chat so that you have because I think that repeating the same thing that is on the blog will be a bit redundant. So it's better that you read it for yourself and make your own conclusions, because it's a strong case, and this is something that is widely ignored when discussing the new trends in the market, which is Arc RBM and ahead of time compiling, and that there is a silver bullet and the panacea, when there is actually not enough evidence to say that. And the idea is that as engineers, we should use the right tool for the right job. And the benefit of running traditional application server runtimes is still there. It's not going anywhere. So.
And yes, we have one question for the audience. Hello, Karina. Is Payara already enterprise or still a community effort?
No, so Payara as a company maintains the community version, and we get help from a lot of people within the community, which also submit code. So we are very grateful for that help. But we also have a enterprise version. The enterprise version is already optimized integration with all the open source components, that there exist in the community edition. So instead of integrating the different notifiers or, for instance, a monitoring tool into the community edition yourself, then you get that already pre-configured in the enterprise version. The enterprise versions are also long-term supported, as Fabio mentioned. That is a very important fact. Every version that we create, for instance, Payara 5 is now the common version. It is supported for 10 years. So we started with that in 2017. So it will be supported until 2027. So each customer who has an enterprise subscription can, during that period, can ask us for support. If you find an issue, we can have a monthly update of the product, including security fixes, upgrade of the frameworks that we use, because we use Weld and Eclipse Link and all those things. That is all included in the enterprise version. So it is a highly optimized version and usable for those mission critical situations that we already mentioned.
Oh, there's the link. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Chad, do you have any question to bring you on? Or can I continue to do questions?
Yeah, go for it. I was skimming this article you just shared, actually. Try to come up with a question on my own, but go for it.
Oh, this one is a good article. Yes, he compared about the cold start problem. If you did not read, please do, because it has several details. But anyway, we compare several solutions with Payara, and okay. Is one question from Gabriel Bonilla. Is there a dependence as Hibernate either at Payara or Jakarta E word?
No, exactly sure if I understand the question, but so for Hibernate inverse, I'm aware of Hibernate, which is a really old, not old, it's a solid technology of implementing object relational mapping on the Java world, and it is a compatible Java persistence API implementation. If you are familiar with the Red Hat ecosystem and the JBoss world, you know that Wildfly and its equivalent, its enterprise level equivalent, which is the Red Hat Enterprise Application Server, or REAP, it comes shipped with Hibernate. So on the Payara world, we have Eclipse Link, which is an open source implementation based on an Oracle protocol top link, which was donated to the community and to the Eclipse Foundation years ago. So technically, yes, you could run Hibernate on Payara. And for example, if you're using Payara, you can forgo Eclipse Link and use Hibernate if you are familiar with that. But the benefit of using standards is that you don't need to worry about that much if you are only concerned with the basics. So that's I think that's about it. No? Actually, there's more to that.
Hibernate Inverse is a specific add-on to Hibernate itself.
Oh, okay.
So in that sense, there is no standard equivalent within Jakarta EE. So that's one part of the question that I can answer then. But as Fabio mentioned, we ship by default Payara with Eclipse Link, but you have the option to use Hibernate, and which means if you add then Hibernate Inverse to your application or to the server, then you can also use it. So that is not an issue.
The point is, Hibernate Inverse is for auditing, so you can, to each event that you do in database, you can create a kind of data log system. For example, I have the user entity, and then I insert some information, so I can create a couple of events to make that possible.
Within the Jakarta world, you have the possibility to define entity listeners also. So so there, when every time you update a entity, then you could write that information also to the database or even to another system. But it is possible with pure Jakarta technology at that Hibernate Inverse, but it is then working on a different way than Hibernate Inverse itself.
Yeah. One of the benefits is that, well, I'm not familiar with Inverse, but seeing a bit on the website, I see that it's useful technology. So maybe on future iterations of the JPA specification, auditing specifics could be considered as a new iteration, and maybe Embers could be used as a template for proper auditing information into JPA entities, and therefore in the future you wouldn't need to worry about whether using either Embers or any other module or a specific add-on on other JPA implementations. So that's one of the benefits of a standards, that you can look up in the future and see, oh, there's something that already does this. I don't need to reinvent the wheel. I can just use easily, or can use it as a template or inspiration to properly implement what I need. Of course, there are the nuances of licensing and patents, but aside from that, standards allow you to do it. So there you go.
Okay, less than 10 minutes to finish here, and the section to me is more important to ask questions about the future, right? Because that's why does exist Jakarta E, and what's going on with Jakarta E now? I mean, what's new in Jakarta E9?
Well, Jakarta E9, which is already out in the open since last year, we took our sweet time to implement it. So I think that either our current iteration of Payara community or the next one will be compatible with Jakarta E9. Can you correct me on that, Rudy, if I'm wrong?
We support it already, but it's not yet certified.
Exactly. So we are still there, but if you are willing to test it out, go ahead. In all honesty, Jakarta E9 is not all that, let's say, impressive, because it is more like a preparation of what's come. Because one of the, let's say, painful parts of the donation of Java E to the community of Jakarta is the trademark. And as many of you are aware, there was a big shift in Jakarta E on the package naming. Whereas all of the APIs of Jakarta E use the Javax package prefix, now that has to be changed to Jakarta. And that internally for vendors has been practically the bulk of Jakarta E9. There are no particular new APIs or features that we can brag about yet. So looking forward, Jakarta E10 should bring new stuff to the table. Once everyone is aware of E9, and once everyone is aware that you can bring your old Java E applications to the Jakarta world without much concern, because vendors are technically making you that making that backwards compatible in a sense, then you don't have to worry about then how to properly migrate your applications. That's for a much later date. So Jakarta 10, it's something that we are looking forward for the year. We internally and other vendors are already looking on contributing on different specs. At the moment, I'm not exactly sure what are the plans. Not sure if Rudy is aware of them. I think it might be, but yeah, I think that's something to look forward to. That's on Payara Community Enterprise. At the moment, it's the motto of enterprise is stability. So we will bring Jakarta in, and once it's ready and once it's fully tested and has been certified. So that's something that our customers can look forward to, but it's not a pressing need for the moment.
Okay, Microprofile 4 has port Jakarta E8, right? And we are saying that we release Jakarta E9. So how to measure to use Jakarta E9 with microprofile? Because we have a big band in the middle, right?
Yep, that's true, and that's the downside of having two separate entities, two separate platforms, because they are not aligned. The official point from microprofile is that it is not even following Jakarta immediately. It is just using those specifications. And yes, for the moment, due to that change of that package name, it is not possible to use microprofile 4 with the Jakarta EE9. There are some tricks to do it today already. I wrote a blog about it in the beginning of January, where you can transform, because there is, it's called the Eclipse transformer, to transform your binary code so that it becomes Jakarta EE9 compatible, or that it can run on EE9. So that is an option if you really want to do it today. If you can wait a few months, I think around the summer, because within the microprofile working group, there was already, I think last week, a discussion, or 2 weeks ago, a discussion how and when we, with microprofile, are going to support the Jakarta EE9 version. But since that change in those package names, that means that we have to maintain two different versions. One gears towards Jakarta EE8 and the older Java X namespace, which will be used by a lot of people for a lot of years. So we cannot just say, oh, we are not supporting those anymore. So we only use the latest version at the E9. But on the other hand, we have indeed also received also the question, when can I use microprofile with the Jakarta E9? So there are early adopters and those who want to make use of it today, but without the hack that I described, you have to wait for a few months.
Oh, nice. There is one comment from Gabriel Bonilla. He tried to use Hibernate Ever with Glassfish and it doesn't work. How can they find an issue to you guys helping with that situation? How the best path?
Well, he tried it with Glassfish. So as I mentioned earlier, Glassfish and Payara at the moment are vastly different products. So my recommendation would be try it out with Payara. And if it doesn't work, then there's always the option of community support. We can't guarantee any immediate fixes, especially on third-party products. But if, for example, we investigate that and find out that Empress doesn't work because there's an inherent problem in our JPA implementation, then we could try to fix that. But it is something that it's related specifically to Empress. I think that it's outside the scope of what we need. On the commercial side, though, if that is one of your big requirements, then you could possibly bring us to us, and then we could prioritize it and consider a solution in enterprise. But again, at the moment, since we don't have the details, I think that best way would be try it first with Payara Community Edition, the current version, or the latest release. See if it works, because Glassfish and Payara are vastly different products. And if it doesn't work, then I would invite you go into our community issue tracker, raise an issue with a reproducible scenario of why it doesn't work, and explain why it doesn't work and what is your setup, and then we could follow on that and see what we can do.
Maybe I can piggyback on that. How do I get started trying out Payara? I see that there's a learn section of your website. Is that like the best resource for getting quickly up to speed in order to try something like that out?
Yes, we have a lot of resources there. So there we have the blogs where you can learn a lot. We have in the learn section of the website, you have all kinds of resources from installing, maintaining, setting it up, to a few things like how to implement security, auth integration, and all kind of things. You can find in those guides. So there is a wide range, and if you find something that we are painfully missing, an area where we have no resources at all, then please give us a message, and we try to fill that gap.
Yeah, we're constantly updating our public documentation, and we have plans of the year for making that more comprehensive. Because at the moment, our product documentation is split, because originally, since we were a fork of Glassfish, then most of the reference on how to use Payara Server, which was the main product at the time, were contained within the Glassfish manuals. So if you were aware of how to run application runtimes, your best bet would be to run the manuals and then to reach the complementary documentation. So one of the main plans for the year is to integrate everything, make it easily readable, more intuitive, so that if you're starting or if you're a mid-level, let's say, engineer, trying to understand the nuances of how to properly operate Payara Server and Micro, then you have all the tools you need in the documentation. And as Rudy mentioned, we have public resources that public user guides and scenarios, learning material, and our official blog that touch a variety of topics and that you might be interested to.
Fantastic.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, finally it's over. I mean, unfortunately it's over.
We can
That
go on
was-
for.
You don't sound so sad about it.
I'm kidding. So, yes, we have an amazing discussion, but unfortunately, it's need to over. However, if you'd like to know more about Payara, you can go to the Payara website. So, payara.fish. So, here the link, where, yes, you can go deep on Payara, know more about these products, how to work with Java, know more about Jakarta, microprofile, and that was amazing to have you guys here. So thank you, Fabio, thank you, Rudy, and thank you, Chad.
Thanks to you guys.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, I was glad to be here, and hopefully you're more interested in both Payara and platform message. So have a good Deploy Friday.
Have a good Deploy Friday, everybody. Bye.
Bye.